Hey everyone, my name is Noah Barnett. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Feathr. And today in the studio, as I am every Friday, I'm joined by Nhu. Nhu, how are you
Hello.
doing?
I'm doing really good, Noah. How are you?
I'm good. I'm back from vacation. I
Yes,
am
you are.
thankful to be back in the desert because I think what you don't realize when you are not in the desert is that it's humid and it's sweaty and it's sticky. And in the desert, everything's just dry, right? And it has pros and cons. But I'm thankful to be back from the Pacific Coast and back in my own element, back in my closet, office, studio, as I like to call it. And I'm just dry, I'm just good. So,
I love that for you.
yeah, thanks. Well, what's been going on in your week? I know we are going to get into the good marketing brief as we
hmm
always do. So, what was the focus and topic for this week's brief?
Yeah, I think we really wanted to dive into, we're still going on that year-end theme, but as we move into the busy season, I know we're going to get, not just us, but like everybody's going to get bombarded with communications, emails, direct mail, ads on just different thing that's happening in the world right now, whether it's like the news or if it's just like pop culture references. You hear a lot of Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift.
They're
Always,
also everywhere. Travis
they're
Kelce is on every
everywhere.
advertisement on TV right
Yep.
now. And I'm
hmm
like, there's two things about that I think is interesting. Sorry, we're going to go on a little tangent, everyone, because I'm a Swiftie fan and
So am I.
I'm skeptical about Mr. Kelce. But that's not why we're here. That's a different podcast. But I do
hmm
think what's interesting is how quickly brands have jumped and tried to news hack this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how did he film these 4 commercials? Or was this already pre-planned? Then I have questions around the timing of all of this. And is it just a big PR campaign? It's
I
very
was thinking the
confusing
same
as a
thing.
marketer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you like, did
Yeah, I
they
mean,
just,
I
I don't
think
know.
I read somewhere, I can't quote the reference, but he was already these campaigns have already been scheduled and he was set to do them anyway, and then just fortuitously he's in the
I
news
don't
all the time
buy
because every,
it.
everyone loves Taylor Swift. So I don't know. It could, I think I don't know. It might be a PR stunt, but whatever the case, everyone's jumping on the bandwagon to try to get a piece of the pie. So
Yeah. Well, enough of that. The other thing I think we can't stop seeing, and as advertisers and marketers, I think about this a lot, is holiday shopping ads are everywhere.
hmm
Amazon has already
hmm
launched their holiday shopping campaign. And I think this
hmm
just amplified as us as nonprofit marketers to be like, oh wow, we're not just competing with other
each other.
nonprofits, we're competing for attention across all of these things. And the
hmm
question, as you outlined, I think in the brief, is if you aren't Taylor Swift and you're not Amazon and don't have the deep pockets, how do you even engage new attention, let alone even retain the attention you have of your current supporters? What can you
Yeah.
actually do?
Yeah.
So what was the
Exactly.
answer to that question?
Yeah.
Wise
I mean,
sage? Yeah, we have to, yeah, answer us, please. I think everyone's waiting anxiously,
dying to know.
what's the
It's not
answer?
super complicated, right? I think the answer to this is creating a very immersive omni-channel experience. I think experience has been something that's been kind of people have been harping about in the space right now because that's the one thing that can really attract your audience, because with all the different distractions and noise coming in from just not the nonprofit space, not just a busy year end season, but that's how you catch the attention of your donors, and that's what they value now. They're looking for brands and organizations that value their support, their loyalty, their contribution, whether if it's not a donation, creating a fundraiser, being a volunteer. How are you personalizing that experience based on where they are in the journey? So I think that's kind of the theme of, not I think, that was the theme of the brief. And so we dived into a lot of cool topics that I find really interesting, and I hope the readers do too.
Yeah. So your first article was linking out to a post that we did about a year ago, but still highly relevant,
Mm-hmm.
on using CRM data to increase your end giving. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not the most shiny tactic, but it's okay, you need to go to your CRM to
Yeah.
find the answers on how you
Mm-hmm.
can stand out. what did the article kind of like highlight, or what's the main takeaways from the article?
Yeah, I think this is such like a baseline tactic, right, for any nonprofit. I think that's how you start looking at how you start building out a campaign, whether it's year end or anything else. I think your CRM holds a lot of every piece of information that you have on your donors, their behaviors, their interests, their preferences, their motivations. It's all in your CRM. And so what I really liked about this article that it dived into different marketing tactics and offered some like examples of how to use your data to improve on a certain marketing tactic. For example, their segmentation when it comes to email, right? It's very baseline for a lot of organizations, but really trying to think about how you can further segment your audience, not just by like giving level or ideal donor profile, whether they live in a certain area, but targeting them based on their activity. Like, are they a one-time donor? How can you kind of move the needle there? And what kind of messaging can you create to get them to donate, not even just at year end, but like beyond, and maybe move them into like a recurring giving cadence? Or if they're a participant at an event, what kind of communications and what kind of messaging is going to resonate with them, probably about whatever event you hosted and any follow-up information about that. And so I think that just thinking a little bit more intricately about some of these marketing campaigns and how to use that data, I think a lot of nonprofits can find the answer that way.
Yeah. And I think it's just also like the simple thing that I found in this article so interesting is just remembering what data you already have to help you be successful. Because a lot of times we're like thinking about what we don't have. And it's like, okay, we don't have the budget of Amazon. We don't have the stardom and like the superstardom of Kelsey and Swift, right? Or we don't have the budget of this nonprofit, or, oh, we could never do blank that, you know, Y organization did. But what going to your CRM does is it orients you back into your community. Like, what do we have? Who has supported us last year? And sometimes we just need that encouragement to be like, oh, last year we did raise $100,000 at year end, or $50,000, whatever, or $1 million, whatever your year end goal was. But it's like reminding you that like people even last year supported your organization, and they gave through email. They might have given through advertising. You might have done some direct mail, or maybe an event or a phone call. But all of that signal is both confidence that this year, like, you know, you can do it again. And two, you can use that context of how people engaged with you last year to inform how you reconnect them to your campaigns this year. And so I think that's what was really important about going back into your data. The other thing that was important that was highlighted here was something so simple, which is like, hey, how about you just call your supporters? Sometimes we get so creative when we're like, oh man, we got to think about this, and we have to do like, you know, omni-channel campaigns, which I totally agree with. And we're going to be hosting a flight school webinar next week talking all about doing omni-channel. It's linked in the show notes down below. But sometimes it's just like going back to the basics, which is like, when in doubt, just do something different or do something old school, like pick up the phone and just call your most loyal supporters, thank them for being a supporter last year, and ask them if you can count on them again.
Yeah.
Why not?
I agree with that. And especially because I think that, you know, with marketing tools out there, it's easy to scale your efforts and be able to, so it's a little bit more, you're putting your resources in the right spot, but also calling your high value donors are the ones that maybe need a little bit more love than the others, and just telling them like, hey, I'm here, I'm listening. I want to build this relationship. I think that goes a long way.
So we talked in this article, or in this week's brief, about how do you use data? How do you think about omni-channel experiences? And then you shared a conversation I had with Cindee Starkie, who's the VP of Marketing and Communications at Starlight. I feel like Starkie working at Starlight like is amazing, but Starlight Children's Foundation. And Cindee was such a delight, and how Starlight Children's Foundation thinks about their marketing in a holistic way was just really refreshing. And Cindee had this great quote where I'll just read it to you. She said, "Our best job as nonprofit marketers is understanding there's a world full of people who are looking to make a difference." looking to make a difference. They just need to know how and where. And so our job is to connect them with the how and the where.
Mm-hmm.
And it encapsulated this beautiful thing that I've shared before on the podcast about Save the Children's founder, where they talk to, the world is not ungenerous, they're unimaginative and very busy.
Yep.
And this kind of is a version of that. But it also then led into practical applications where it said, okay, if there's a world out there looking to make a difference, it's not just about the channels or the tactics and the data we use, it's also about the message that we're sharing with them. And that they saw a 50% increase in their website conversions just by simplifying their message. By basically going back to the drawing board and saying, hey, how could we simplify this? Not carve it down and make it overly like off mission. Like it's still telling the truth. And in some ways, probably telling more of the truth about the power of supporting their organization. It was like just simplifying the mission or the messaging, increase their conversion by 50%, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
Anything you took away from this conversation with Cindee that stood out that marketers should think about this year end?
I mean, that's probably my favorite part of the conversation. I think a lot of times in fundraising, you look at the for-profit and you try to mirror that with yours, but the bright and shiny new way to message or like get the attention of your donors doesn't always work. They just like having that very donor-centric and simplified messaging can really undercomplicate the story that you're trying to tell. Because sometimes with a lot of nonprofits, their mission can be overcomplicated. They're doing a lot. And so kind of breaking that down in a way that allows the donor to see point A, like they're at point A and point B is here. And I think that just goes a long way.
Yeah. One of the great examples that she shared was they would talk about raising funding for these like handheld gaming devices that they have. And how like on the surface, it's like, oh yeah, I get to provide a child some like entertainment, or I get to provide, a child something fun to do. Right. And that's like simplistic. But she was like, when we really dug further and explained to the supporters that like, they might need this because it's helping them connect with other kids because they need to be separated because of the illness that they have, or that they can't be around other children at the risk of maybe being exposed to something. And so the idea of portability is actually really important because they can still stay connected socially, even if they're distanced physically. And I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it, but it's like, that's what you're funding. You're not funding a Switch for a kid, in a situation like this. Like, no, you're funding connection and
community,
sustained connection.
Right. So like the kids can feel like they're hanging out with their friends, or they're hanging out with the kid down the hallway. It's not just a device. It's a means to find interaction, find connection, and find friendship and camaraderie. So
absolutely. Even just the idea of like upgrading the rooms to feel more like homey is like, oh, simple. Like, oh, put decorations up. Like, that's fun.
Yeah.
I'll fund that. It's like, no, you're making them feel dignity and normalized because they just happen to have to be in a hospital. Why can't they feel belonging and homey, like homeness in this environment?
Yeah,
like,
I love that you brought that up.
I
love that you brought that up because I think that is important. Coming from like personal experience, just like my dad he passed a couple years ago from cancer. And so those rooms feel cold without any like homey personal touches that remind you of family, remind you of your house. It can feel lonely and it can feel dark and it can feel like you're kind of isolated from society. So being able to do that for someone, I think, is super incredible. And I'm actually getting goosebumps just thinking about it because I remember how my dad would feel when like we would bring something that reminded him of home. And that is what you're funding. That is what you're like, that's where your generosity is going. It's not just like a physical item. So
yeah. And I think that's, and I really appreciate you sharing that personal story because I think that's the opportunity we have as nonprofit marketers. Again, it's like driving this connection because again, like funding a fun toy for someone is great. Or in my case, like in international development, like we funded food and shelter and clothing for kids that lived in developing communities. But it's like, that's just like the vehicle to get to the impact, and
Exactly.
reminding people of the impact they can be a part of. In this case, feeling like they're at home or they're connected, or in the case of the organization I worked with, we were actually giving these kids like the opportunity to dream again, because if you don't provide for basic needs, like dream quotient decreases as they're just trying to survive, like anyone would, and people could relate to maybe the times they had to struggle, and that now that they are feeling more secure, like they can have more hope and dream. Leaning in this end of year season to stand out from the noise doesn't require a budget like Amazon or stardom like Taylor. It requires us to remember that the missions we are working on matter, and marketing is mission critical to making those missions known and inviting people to be a part of it.
Exactly. And I think I mentioned that in my intro to the brief, saying that like we're not selling materialistic things, we're not selling services. What we're selling is like altruism, that feeling of like when you do something good for somebody that's going to significantly impact somebody's life, that can't be replicated. You can't find that anywhere else but to contribute or support an organization that you really, really resonate with. So
absolutely. And again, I think it's using means that we have to be able to connect with our audience, and like what Feathr talks about a lot is like, how do we how do we connect our community with the cause? And that's our job as marketers. And there's a lot of different tools to do that. And I think one thing you highlighted in this article was how there's even like new ways to connect through something I can't really say that well, but RMNs, and how like it's not really associated with nonprofits, but it's an interesting idea of how leveraging places that have consumption of attention, how do you gain access to that? Like it's in similar, we rent attention on social, right? Like we don't own that attention, we rent that attention. And so things like Target and others are thinking a little bit different about this. But what is an RMN and why should nonprofits care?
So RMN is a retail media network, and it's basically a platform that it's basically an online marketplace that allows other brands to buy ad space on the platform. So a good example of this is Amazon and Target, like you mentioned. They are a mega brand, and they sell, whether it's in the physical stores or for Amazon online, you can feature your products on their platform for a price. And so for nonprofits, it sounds completely like unrelated to nonprofits because RMNs are targeted toward B2B space, but it gets the brain thinking about how nonprofits can think outside the box and find other opportunities to kind of elevate their mission and get it out there and engage the people that they want to engage. And so an example of this would be corporate partnerships. So partnering with a brand, maybe like Walmart, to give people an opportunity to give. So as they're making their purchases during their holiday shopping, it's like, hey, would you consider donating to the Salvation Army or something like that? And so a lot of times in the season of giving, people do that. And so they'll opt into, either round up. You see that a lot when you're in the checkout line. You can round up, or it's like you can donate a certain amount, and then you get like something to sign and like put up in the store.
Yeah, I think what it emphasized for me, in addition to those, was how important it is to understand where your community is giving their attention beyond your organization. Because you're not going to own, if you're a nonprofit, bursting a little bit of bubbles, you're not going to own 100% of your supporters' attention. Like, it's just impossible. And it'd be ridiculous. No one deserves 100% of anyone's attention, even though I think Amazon and Apple and Facebook and stuff are trying. They're like, oh, I'll take all of it. But they are giving their attention to other things. And I think this is where it's like thinking creatively about like, where is your community investing time and energy? and who is stewarding that attention. And you could think of like a Walmart, you could think about a Facebook or an Instagram and stuff. And those are big, it's hard to access, it's pay to play, etc. But one creative idea that I just was reminded of is that we as an organization had a supporter that sold toothbrushes to dental offices to give away for free. Like, or they sold like the all the supplies that they give you in the white little baggie after you get your teeth cleaned, and then you use it like when you travel and stuff. But what this supporter had was a network of dentists that were focused on hygienes of their community. And this business owner was like, well, one of the core aspects of dental hygiene is clean water. And we had a clean water initiative at our organization. And so he was like, I have a population that understands the value and the importance of clean water. And I am now engaging all of these dentists to now be a part of giving back to this water campaign, right? We had never even thought about the idea that like, wow, clean water and dentists really align. Who has a trusted relationship with dentists if dentists are an ideal best donor, both from disposable income and alignment to the cause? Like, who has their attention? And so it's this idea of like thinking about who your core supporters are, and then who could you proxy with to gain access to that intention. I think that's what these RMNs gave spotlight to, is that like thinking creatively about how you can use partnerships and or like strategic advertising or connections to do that. It's really fascinating and really, really cool idea. And I think it's a great read. It's also there was an article you linked to by our friend Tobes Kelly, who we reference pretty much every week. He's an incredible kind of like luminary, visionary type person on really like talking about really practical things that nonprofits may not really think about, but should be. And so we've talked a lot about like messaging and data and marketing and different things like that. And you end this week's brief with something a little bit different, but I think highly related. How did you end the brief this week?
So I highlighted in the inspiration section the new film documentary from Dan Pallotta, who is like a huge humanitarian. He's a writer. He's now like a film producer. And I think everyone knows him because he has kind of harped on like the overhead kind of myth that, nonprofits, unlike for-profits, nonprofits are held at a much higher standard. And so they are almost like criminalized when like 100% of donation revenue doesn't go toward the mission, which is like great in theory if you have very wealthy philanthropists backing your organization. But for a lot of nonprofits, that's not a reality. They still have operating costs. They still have staff they need to pay. And if you are not kind of funding your talent and your staff, you're not going to find the people who have the talent to grow the mission to help get nonprofits where they want to go, because they're not getting paid enough. And two, if they are on staff, there's no way they're going to retain them long term. And so he basically joined this conversation with John and Becky at We Are for Good podcast to kind of talk about this skewed reality nonprofits are living and how we can, as a sector, rewrite the narrative. And that's by, talking more about it, kind of educating the public about why this matters for nonprofits, why we have to kind of move away from this super antiquated theory of like, yes, nonprofits are for good. They are helping people live better lives and improving the way us as a society, but they shouldn't get paid for it. I think it's just hurting our sector to kind of move the missions forward and create the impact that the world wants to see. I really love this conversation. I think they really get into the nitty gritty of breaking through that stigma that's existing, and then offering. I know there's a section where Dan talks about how we as a sector can use new media to get the word out there, you know, whether it's like the biggest foundations putting billions of dollars into this initiative, just buy out every billboard, buy out the Super Bowl ads, and just educating, you know, the world on the impact nonprofits are making and why we deserve to live a normal life and to buy a house, you know, to buy a car and just be able to afford the things that everyone else does.
Yeah. And I think this is really relevant to this audience. When we talk about doing good marketing, it's based on a belief that marketing is mission critical. And I think if you think about the argument within Uncharitable, it's overhead overall, both staffing and expenses, and our thinking that anything we do to promote or to try to reach new donors or to maybe stand out, or maybe we pay a bunch of money to partner with a big celebrity to do these things, like all of that is wasteful. And that's only a means to the mission, and we should limit how much we do that, because philanthropy should just be like unscripted generosity. And I think, as we quoted earlier, is that there's a world full of people looking to make a difference, but we need to be able to show them how to do that. And that's where marketing comes into play. That's where people at nonprofits come into play, because we are part of the mission. And I think there was an incredible campaign associated with Uncharitable where they had these shirts where it was like, for nonprofit staff, it was like, I'm overhead. And it was like this ad campaign that they did where they were just like, that can't be true. Like, if we really describe what this system sets up for us, we're basically saying that the work of those that work in nonprofits and any work we do to promote is like anti generosity, and that's not, or anti-charity,
like frivolous, right? It's like, frivolous,
it's like you shouldn't
expense.
do it.
Exactly.
But that's not true. You have to tell people about children in hospitals that need to feel connected. You have to tell people about animals that need rescued, or the environment that needs saved, or the policy that needs changed. These things have to be shared and invite people to be a part of them. We have to activate the unimaginative and very busy. We have to activate those looking to make a difference. And I think that's what our roles are as marketing. And I think this is a movie and a documentary I think everyone should go watch. Go listen to the interview. It's linked in the show notes below. Go watch the documentary if you have the opportunity. And definitely check out Dan's work. Even if you disagree with some things Dan says, I think there's a lot to be learned as a sector from the framing of the arguments that he's presenting. And I think it's a great tool to spark the right conversation. And excited that we can highlight it in this week's, because it does require you to promote your cause at year end, right? And we can't just say, look what we don't have. We have to say, look at what we have. What are we actually doing? And how do we use smart, good marketing to connect our community to our causes? And this week's brief kind of like encompasses a variety of ways for you to do that. So if you're interested in the Good Marketing Brief, it comes out every Wednesday morning and drops straight into your inbox. New Take curates it. It's brilliant. And so you can subscribe to the Good Marketing Brief if you don't currently get it, or you should go search your inbox for Good Marketing Brief and you'll find it there if you're already subscribed and missed this week's. You can also link to all the discussion items we talked about in the show notes. And Nhu, thanks for being here every Friday with me. I really appreciate it. And we'll do it again next week.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
We'll see you then. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, and have a great week.
Bye.